So Timothy Leary wrote this book called Your Brain is God, and I haven't read the whole thing. I read a few chapters out of it, but when you first hear that, it sounds kind of materialistic, right? That this brain matter up here is the ultimate meaning of reality, basically. But then when you explore it a little more, is this really materialism? Because if we really pay attention to the fact now that this in here, this goo, or this really highly complex and evolved um, piece of hardware, let's say, creates this image that my eyes see, right? I don't see the world. I see the light reflected off of something that goes into my retina and gets picked up by the rods and cones and then processed by my visual cortex and then reflected back up to the frontal lobe where some kind of perception or sense gets made out of it, right? So then the whole thing is this projector screen, and basically Plato was right. So extreme scientific materialism turns into Platonism or idealism because the whole thing turns into a projector screen. And we can never get to the reality itself. The reality itself is just the ideas that are projected by the brain. Because the brain is God. So when we say that the brain is God, it sounds materialistic, it sounds objectivist maybe. If you are an objectivist as a if that's your philosophy, then your biology, your physiology, your neurology, your psychology is going to be materialistic, right? It's going to say basically that your brain creates the world. Your brain is where your intelligence and your rationality function. And if through empirical observation of the objective world itself, a neurologist can come to find that, this sector over here of the frontal cortex is responsible for this kind of rational thought, and if we stimulate it this way, it makes people smarter, well, then an objectivist is going to have to say, well, then we should stimulate it. Maybe. I mean, not all objectivists. I don't know. I'm just talking about words, I guess. But if we do really pay attention to the fact that we are a brain, quite objectively speaking, there's no subject in here then that can view an objective world out here. I only see the projection that my brain fabricates out of the random inputs of light that my eyes receive. I don't see what's out there. I see what's being reflected in here, in this echo chamber, and it just gets bounced around, and somehow my experience happens. But knowing this, we can't assume, like, this knowledge of what the brain does started because we assumed that the world out here was objective, and we started measuring it and cutting up the body and doing anatomy and doing empirical tests and experiments on the brain and how you stimulate this sector over here and it stimulates a memory, and if you go deeper in, you can start giving people tactile sensations by running electrodes down the part of the brain, and they can feel it on their face, on their body. So we did all these experiments, and we know now through empirical observation that we can't ever reach the objective world, and that in fact, to say that an objective world exists outside of the virtual world that my brain creates for me, that's just a conjecture. We have no um, objective proof or access to such a thing as the objective world. And this sort of makes every ism, idealism, rationalism, objectivism, materialism, empiricism, whatever, it just, they don't even make sense in this context anymore. Which is, I should just shut up.